The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Here's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show. Fantasy players regressing. Council curse continues in a beautiful way. Angel Hernandez retires, and, well, the weekly waiver wire additions and drops. That's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show. Play ball! Welcome in to an all-new edition of the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show, presented by Belly Up Fantasy Sports, Righteous Felon Jerky, and Seat Geek. I'm your host, Vince Stover, and I'm joined, as I am every week, by the senior fantasy writer for BellyUpFantasySports.com, and he's also position eligible at outfield, shortstop, and third base, the one and only Kevin Wilson. Hey, Kev, how you doing, man?
Hey, we're doing great here, Vince. We had an interesting week here in Dallas, as you may have heard. We had a strong storm blow through here on Tuesday morning, knocked out our power for almost 48 hours, and caused some of the most widespread damage I've ever seen. And we got through it. Can't say the same for a lot of our food, but we made it. We're here. And so we're doing great. We just got done having a pretty good brainstorm blow through here. So stormy weather has been the norm around here for the last week or so.
Yeah, we had a torrential downpour about an hour ago here in Kentucky. We had wind and tornadoes, not in our area, didn't have tornadoes in our area, but lots of wind, limbs down, trees down, stuff like that. Fortunately for us, we did not lose power this time. And so our fridge is empty, but that's because we're getting ready to go on a trip. so we haven't stocked it up.
Yeah, unfortunately for us, we had gone to the store the night before because we knew a storm was coming. Yep. And so we had a bunch of food in our fridge. We have two fridges here. And so a lot of that was out in the trash come Thursday morning. So that was kind of sad. But
that is sad.
Yeah. But other than that, we made it through.
Yeah, and we're glad that you did, of course, as well. Well, we have a lot of baseball to talk about tonight. Let's get things started with our first segment of the night, which is our Fantasy Burner segment. The Fantasy Burner is presented by SeatGeek, your one-stop shop for tickets, whether you're going to a baseball game, football game, basketball game. Maybe you are trying to get tickets to watch Caitlin Clark play somewhere, because apparently all the women in WNBA hate her, but fans are still buying tickets. So maybe that's what you're trying to do. Maybe you're like me and you're going out to buy baseball tickets while you're gone on vacation. You can get it at SeatGeek.com. Use the code BellyUpSports. You're going to get $20 off your purchase. Again, I purchased 4 tickets in Tampa to watch the Rays and the Orioles on this coming Monday, and use that discount code. Got my discount as well. So it works. Check it out and make sure you buy into that as well.
All right. If it does work, I've done it. I've used it. So if you're looking for tickets, nowhere else do you need to go.
That's right. All right. So let's talk about some players regressing. We had players who started off hot, and they're trending the wrong direction at the moment. And this is not necessarily our waiver wire cuts just yet, but maybe guys that started off really solid, but have tapered off, and maybe you should be willing to at least consider trading or releasing at some point, or whatever it may be. They're not necessarily the guys that you're going to just absolutely hold on to at all costs at this point, because they are trending the wrong direction. Kev, I'm interested to see who you came up with for this segment. I got 3 guys. I'm interested to see who you came up with this segment, though.
Okay, so the first guy I came up with is from the local baseball club, which is, of course, the Texas Rangers. And that player is Marcus Semien. And if you have seen, he was in a 4 for 33 slump there coming into this week. And they sat him on Wednesday, which broke his 349 consecutive starts streak. And he had a game off on Thursday. The Rangers didn't play. And so I'm certainly not saying, you mentioned about dropping people or whatever. Marcus Simeon does not fall into that category, but he is certainly a guy that you had to be concerned about, because this is the player that was third in the American League MVP voting a year ago, and a player who was in every game, as I just mentioned. But he took a couple days off. He had 3 hits yesterday. He had 3 walks today. So maybe that was what he needed, and he'll get it turned things around, because Seager sitting behind him is as hot can possibly be. So if he can get on base, he will go score a lot of runs. So Marcus Simeon was the guy I was really concerned about. I drafted him for the 2nd straight year. And so I was really concerned about him. And I hope in this weekend shows that he has turned a corner and will once again be that guy that you can count on your fantasy team.
That's an interesting one. I like that one. I'm going to go with a top 10 shortstop in fantasy right now. A guy that you've mentioned a couple times throughout the season as a guy you liked. But it's Washington's shortstop, CJ Abrams. Abrams had a hot start in April, 7 home runs, 17 RBIs, 11 walks, and he hit 295. In the month of May, he dropped down to only 2 home runs. He upped his RBIs to 27, but he only walked 1 time. He struck out 9 more times in the month of April, and his batting average dropped to 205. Now, when you've got a guy that's on a team like Washington, they're always going to be on my, keep an eye on list. When they're hot, have them. When they're not, drop them. Now, Abrams is a top 10 shortstop. He's owned in 90% of leagues, so he's not a guy that you're necessarily going to drop. But he's obviously started off well, and now he seems to be tapering the wrong direction in most situations. So he's a guy that I can't say I've ever been a huge Abrams fan. Anyhow, but looking at CJ Abrams, he's a guy that I'm looking at right now going, okay, maybe he's got some value that I can move him for someone I trust a little bit more than CJ Abrams.
Well, I'm not going to say I'm a CJ Abrams fan, but I do have him on my fantasy team. And so I know exactly what you're talking about. Plus, now he's missing games with some kind of an injury. I'm not sure what that is. He's day to day. So he's a guy that you definitely want to keep your eyes on. And fortunately for me, I've got Volpe as another shortstop option on my team. So if it does become CJ Abrams, it is a continued issue. Maybe there's something I can do and move on from him. But yes, he's definitely a guy you need to be concerned about.
All right. Who else you got?
So the next guy I have is also someone on my fantasy team, which is somewhat unfortunate at present. And that is a pitcher, and that's Kyle Harrison of the San Francisco Giants. And so he started off as about as hot as you could possibly start off. He gave up 1 earned run in his first 18 innings on the season. So hot. And if you talk about fantasy points, he had 21, 19, 14, 21, 12, 23, which is quite a run. However, over his last 4 starts, he's given up 14 earned runs in 20 innings. He's only pitched 5 innings in all of those games. And his last start, which was really, truly unfortunate, because he gave me -2 fantasy points. And so that is a real ouch, if you will. And Tuesday, he's at Arizona. And so he's a player that he's at 34.5% rostered. And so, but if Tuesday comes and goes and he still is a big stinkerino, then in a 10-man league, especially in a league like ours, you have to make the decision to move on from him. The Giants are coming around a little bit, but it's not because of Kyle Harris.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I like where you're going with pitcher on this one, because that's exactly where I'm going to. And that is another young guy who started off incredibly well in Pittsburgh, Jared Jones.
Yes.
In the month of April, he let's see here. He pitched 3.18 ERA, 42 strikeouts, only 5 walks, 7 home runs allowed. His opponents had a 208 batting average, 242 OBP, and a 424 slugging. In the month of May, his ERA went up to just about 3.99. He dropped in strikeouts from 42 to 28. His walks were very similar. He had 7 compared to 5. He gave up only 4 home runs compared to 7. But the batting average from his opponents went up from went up from 208 to 232, which still is pretty good. His OBP at 275 and his slugging at 420. Listen, I still like Jones, but again, just like Abrams, he's on a team that's not very good. And that's always going to come back. Now, Skeens has come up and been phenomenal since he's been there. Jones has still been good, but not to where he was in April. And that's trending the wrong direction for him. And again, to me, I look at these guys and I go, there's value here that you can probably trade Jones and get back some really good value and really not be losing much in letting him go just because he's trajecting the wrong direction.
Yeah, if you want to make a move on him, you might want to consider doing that pretty soon, because as you mentioned, he's definitely trending in the wrong direction. And so this next guy is a guy that I've brought up the last 2 weeks on this very show, but I brought him up in the drop section. So I'm going to bring him up here at the top, and hopefully somebody might hear what I'm saying right now, because Reed Detmers is still at 51.6% rostered. Okay. And so he had a very good 4 start, to the season. And everything looked great. People rushed out to get him, which I certainly understand that. But he's given up 8 starts since that 4 starts. He's given up 40 earned runs in 8 starts. Okay. His fantasy is this, if you want to call it that: -1, 3, 0, 8, 0, 6, -4. There is no reason why this guy is on anyone's roster, especially not 51%. And so the Angels, they're in free fall. They didn't even score a run today against the Mariners. And so the whole thing, as we wisely predicted, has gone off the rails, and Detmer has helped steer the ship right over the cliff. And so please, I mentioned this last week, don't do this to yourself. Get rid of Reed Detmers and do it today. That great start has been submarined, and he has no reason to be around on your team.
Very interesting. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. That's for sure. The last guy that I've got is a guy that started off white hot in fantasy and has come to a near screeching stop. That's the outfielder from the Arizona Diamondbacks, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. In April, 5 home runs, 22 RBIs, 8 walks, 21 strikeouts. He hit 254. And then in the month of May, only 1 home run. He dropped down to only 9 RBIs, 3 walks, 20 strikeouts, and he dropped his average down to 213. Again, when he started off the season, I mean, those first few weeks, he was the leading outfielder. He was the top 5 outfielder in fantasy points. He's yet to hit 100. That tells you how much he slowed down in the month of May. And again, I don't know that he carries the same value that it doesn't as Jared Jones. But he's a guy, again, I'm willing to look past him. I'm really look, he's owned in 77% of leagues, which I think is fair, but I don't really want him on my team. And he's going the wrong direction right now. And I'm not sure that he's going to pull out of that slump, at least to get back to real relevance. I think I can do better than Lourdes Gurriel.
I think that you're right. The entire Arizona Diamondbacks team has greatly disappointed this year.
As a Corbin Carroll owner, yes.
Yeah. If you have Corbin Carroll, and Gallen was pitching well, but he's had some setbacks. So that entire Arizona team, I talked about Walker earlier on, and he's another guy I guess we could have brought up right here. But but Arizona, we expected much more out of them. And the last guy I'm going to bring up is somebody that I've talked about in the past to get him on your team. much egg on my face at this point in time because that player is Giancarlo Stanton of the New York Yankees. And he was as hot. He had Judge and he had Rizzo and all those guys and Soto, of course. And he was hitting as well as any of those guys. But he is now 4 for 40. Okay. 3 runs and 3 RBIs in that stretch. Okay. And so he's a guy that when he heats up, he heats up.
Yeah.
And so you get him on your team, you ride the wave for about a week or so. And as soon as you see that wave is over, you cut him. Now's that time. Get him off your team. And he's only DH qualified. And, which is great if you have a DH spot, which we do. But if he's not hitting, it's not helping. So despite the Yankees and their predominance in the American League so far this year, Giancarlo Stanton is not now a part of that, so he needs to hit the wire.
Yeah. I had him on one of my teams. I drafted him in a league. I was a 12-man league. He was towards the end of the draft, and I was like, oh, Stanton's still there. All right, I'll give it a try. And he did not last very long on my roster. Needless to say, I'm not a Stanton fan at this point in his career.
I'm not either, but he forced my hand. I actually picked him up a while back because, he went through a stretch where he had like 3 or 4 home runs in a 3-game span. And May, he was really hot to start. But that ride is now over. And as I mentioned, 10-team league, he has no place but on the waiver wire. So help yourself and move him to that waiver wire and let him stew until he heats up again. And then maybe you can see about bringing him on board.
Fair enough. So there you go. Some players that are regressing. They're headed the wrong direction. So maybe now's the time to look to move on from some of these guys, or maybe you want to hold on a little longer and see if they can pull it out. It just feels like they're going to continue to head on that wrong trajectory. That's our fantasy burner. It's presented by SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com. Use the code BellyUpSports. You're going to get $20 off your purchase. And now it's time for segment number 2. This is one I've been excited to get to this week, Kevin. It's our call to the pin. The call to the pin is presented by Righteous Felon Jerky, your best place to go to find the snack that you've been waiting for. You can join the flavor revolution at righteousfelon.com. Use the code STOVE15. STOVE15. You're going to get 15% off your purchase. Kevin, this was a wonderful week in baseball. Maybe the best week we've had in ages. The most exciting news the MLB has put out in probably at least a decade. Angel Hernandez announces he is retiring. This is so good for baseball, in my opinion. Would you agree?
I agree with that. And when you've got an umpire who's generating more news than the game itself, that's never, ever a good sign. And so every time it seems like there was a game that he umpired against the Rangers, and Langford was at the plate, and he called 3 pitches that were nowhere near the strike zone. All 3 of them were strikes. This is a young kid, and he's sitting there, and he probably didn't know which end of, if his head is up, down, sideways. He can't figure out what the strike zone is. And so I saw that with my own eyes that played out here in Texas. And that's certainly not the only time that he has been involved in that. His name shows up just about every time he's behind the plate. And it's never a good, it's not like a attaboys or any of that other stuff.
Right.
And he can sit there and he can call that a retirement if he wants, which I guess he did. But no one retires in the middle of the baseball season. You're an umpire. And how tough is that?
Right.
Right. And so there was things that were going on behind the scenes that got this guy out. And it was kind of funny because universally, all these players, somebody usually retires. Somebody's like, "Hey, have a nice life," or you know, great working, beside you or whatever. But no, this guy has been nothing but bombed as far as talking about that he's going to work for some kind of uh, uh, what was it, Boeing? I don't know if you saw that or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you don't want to be on too many Boeing airplanes going in the future. It's stuff like that. I did put that out there. Somebody else did, and that he was going to be working on eyeglasses or something, and so yeah, so there's
How
never
many
been a player or a coach or anything else that was universally praised to the heavens when he stepped aside more than Angel Hernandez.
how many umpires names do you know? I can think of three.
There's a few
active ones. I can think of Joe West and CB
Yeah.
Buckner. And CB Buckner's in the exact same boat as
exact
Hernandez.
same. Yeah, and so he's just got a little smaller motor to that boat, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
than Angel Hernandez does, because he's got full blown, both two motors behind that boat that's driving him completely underneath the water. And but yeah, so umpires, you're not supposed to know who they are,
Right.
and
I feel like with Joe West, I feel like we know him a little bit more for his personality than his calls. He's been personable. He's had some fun little clips and whatever. And he's been around, of course, forever. Hernandez, same way, he's been around forever, but you don't hear anything positive about him. Everyone, and I don't know how Major League Baseball didn't make this happen earlier. I mean, he was not good, and so obvious he was not good. And it wasn't that he missed every single call. It's that he knew he could do whatever he wanted, and there were games where he did. And
that's right.
And it never seemed to have gotten correct. And I think there was a time last year or 2 years ago where they didn't put him behind the plate for a while, but he just shouldn't have been around. And so he retired. He's gone. And again, baseball's better for it because baseball needs positive. It's not that any publicity is good publicity for baseball. They need positive publicity. And Angel Hernandez made MLB a joke. And, it's like non-baseball people had heard of him because he shows up on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all these things with how bad he is. It was bad for the sport, and him being gone is good for the sport. And we're excited to see that progress in the right direction. Now, again, maybe this puts the spotlight on a CB Buckner or somebody like that, where immediately he starts getting put under that same magnifying glass, and we'll see how that shakes out when it's all said and done as well. Kevin, let's move on to a topic that I know you are excited to talk about as I am. Let's get to our council curse tracker this week. So just a quick recap. Worst human being in the world. Grew up in Milwaukee, played in Milwaukee, managed in Milwaukee, only to leave to go coach for the ugliest, nastiest rival team in the world, the Chicago Cubs. And I told you before the season started, I told you back in February, the baseball gods would not look fondly on the backstabbing of Craig Counsell. Well, we've been tracking all throughout the season, players getting hurt, stats dropping off the cliff, all these other things, but nothing is more proving of the Counsell curse than this past week's 4-game series. Chicago,
4 games. That's right.
Milwaukee. This is they've already played at Chicago, but this was at Milwaukee. The Brewers winning 5-1, losing 3-6, winning 10-6, and winning 6-4 in beautiful fashion in most of these games. Willie Adames was an absolute stud during this week. Just phenomenal. Contreras has been phenomenal all season. But to watch and to hear the boos, the video played, which I'm still shocked they did. But the Craig Counsell video played, the thank you video played on the Jumbotron, and the boos came raining down. It's a beautiful thing to experience and witness. And I wasn't there in person, but it was a wonderful thing. And that being said, here's what I compared it to, Kevin. I compared it to Brett Favre. When Favre was gone, he came back, booze, booze, booze. At some point, the Milwaukee faithful will forgive Craig Counsell. It'll help if the Brewers win a World Series, but they will forgive Craig Counsell at some point in time, I believe. But it's going to take time. And he's said the right things so far. I enjoyed the week, needless to say.
I thought that you would. I saw that not only were the Brewers winning, but how they were winning.
Yeah.
And they just kind of hit the accelerator for the Cubs slide, and they have been sliding. And so I've been kind of waiting to see when this curse was going to take firm hold of the Cubs. Well, it's holding right now.
Yeah.
And because the Cubs, they've won 2 of their last 10 games, and now they're 7.5 games out of first.
Yeah.
And so Curse, is settled in over Wrigley Field, and so I knew that you'd be particularly happy with that this week.
Well, and what's even crazier, Kevin, is at one point this week, the Cardinals moved into sole possession of second place. Now,
that's right.
Right now, they're tied. They're not exactly tied, but they're, for all practical purposes, tied. They're both 7.5 back. The Cardinals have played 2 less games. But anyways, the Cardinals have made this run. They lost 2 straight, but they won 7 out of their last 10. And all of a sudden, the Cardinals are peaking at a point where you go, okay, they've got the veterans and Goldschmidt and Arenado. They've got some young guys too. The pitching is what it all comes down to in St. Louis. But, the Pirates aren't good. The Reds aren't good. And the Cubs are supposed to be good, but, they haven't been great up to this point either. And so the Cardinals can sneak into contention here, and they're doing that right now. And I don't like the Cardinals either. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
It's kind of funny to watch the Cubs go from tied to, a game and a half back to all of a sudden being 7.5 games back. And by the way, the Brewers, the only team in the division with a positive run differential, and of course, the only team in the division above 500 as well.
Right. And that Curse had been leaving Imagina, or however you pronounce his name, alone.
Shota. I just call him Shota.
Okay, Shota. Okay, cool. It had been leaving him alone, but he got blowed up.
Yes.
In his last start. Yes. And so the Curse was kind of like, I guess, was behind the curtain or whatever, just waiting for its to pounce. Well, it pounced pretty hard on him this past week, so nobody's exempt anymore.
Right. And he was the one guy who had just had such this great season. He was constantly putting up great numbers. His ERA still is really good. He's 5-1, and that one came in Milwaukee. He only got 4.1 innings. He gave up 7 earned runs. He walked only 1, but he also only struck out 1, which was the least amount of strikeouts he's had since April 7th against the Dodgers in his second start. 7 runs, by far he's only given up 2 up to this point in a game. So only given up 5, I think, all season before this game, and he gave up 7 against Milwaukee. Yes, thank you to the baseball gods for showing up in blue and gold this week and cheering up, because it was just absolutely gorgeous. And the next best thing would be to watch the White Sox sweep the Cubs. That would be phenomenal. I don't think it's going to happen, but that would be pretty sweet.
No,
if it did. You don't think that's going to happen?
No, I don't think that's going to happen. And why do I think that? Is because the White Sox are only 24.5 games out of first and a negative 135 run differential. And so that would certainly, be, established. The curse would be established for good if the White Sox beat the Cubs. And because the White Sox are just absolutely awful. And not much else you can say about them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Big news coming in this week. Garrett Cole's making his first rehab start on Tuesday. Max Scherzer thinks that maybe he's finally progressing the right direction as well. We're going to come into this second half of the baseball season, and if some pitchers can get healthy, I think it's really going to spark some teams. The Rangers need a spark right now, and if Scherzer can find his way back onto the field, obviously that would be huge. And for Cole to add him to the Yankees, I mean, my goodness, the Yankees have been good. You add Cole to that, especially if he's back to Cole form. My soul, Yankees will be dangerous.
Yes, they will. And just, don't be celebrating just yet over Cole or Scherzer. But because we saw that Cole, it looked awful. It looked bad. And here we are in June, so we know that's for sure. But if he can get back, and if you've got him on your IL, you definitely need to activate him, put him on your roster. Same with Scherzer. And maybe they could pitch, because Verlander, he's had some stink games, but for the most part, he's pitched well. And so if they, either one of them or both of them, could be as good as Verlander, then that's solid.
How many teams do you think are legitimate World Series threats this year? Not to make it, but to win the World Series, because we look throughout Major League Baseball and there are not very many good teams.
No, I would say in, let's see, the National League, I'd say there are 4.
Really?
Because I think, because the Dodgers, I still think Atlanta is a legitimate team.
Really?
Even though I'm not all out on Atlanta, even though I'd like to be, but maybe that's going to come off there. But Philadelphia is, I think Milwaukee is, and
so I think it's Philly and the Dodgers in the NL as legit threats. I put the Braves, just the season that they're having, the injuries that they've had. I put the Braves and the Brewers in the same category. Good, but are they consistent? Are they good enough? Can they win a 7-game series? What kind of are they sitting right now? So to me, it's the Phillies and the Dodgers in the NL.
Well, Braves as currently constituted, probably not, but they've got the means and the ability to make some moves. And so in the American League, I would say that's probably 3 teams.
Okay. I say 3 also. Now, who are your 3?
My 3, of course, the Yankees.
Yeah.
Baltimore Orioles.
Yeah.
And Cleveland Indians.
Yeah. Well, they don't exist, the 3. But the Cleveland Guardians. Yeah.
Yeah. Cleveland. I'm sorry. Cleveland. You think after, 3 years now, you get used to that sort of thing. But so Cleveland, New York, Baltimore.
I agree.
And I discount every team in the AL West. They are all broken. None of them are whole. And Kansas City will make the playoffs, I'm saying, still right here. But as far as being legitimate World Series contenders, no. Minnesota, at their most powerful, never were, because they couldn't beat the Yankees if they played them 100 times.
Okay.
And so that leaves 3 teams to me. And maybe you'll see that when you go to see them, you'll see Baltimore, with your own eyes, and can come back and talk about how they looked. But I'd put New York ahead of them, of course, because they're not only they're ahead of them, but in the standings as well. Yeah. Cleveland, they're playing good baseball. If they can make some starter moves, that would strengthen their case. But
well, Cleveland leads the AL in run differential.
That's all there is.
Yeah. They're scoring as good as anybody. They're 1 run below the Yankees. I think that the Guardians are legit threats in the American League. I do think that we could see a team in the West emerge at some point, but as it currently sits, none of them are threats. I still think the Astros are the scariest team out there in the West. But listen, you've talked about the Mariners pitching, and they are good, and they're a rotation that if you can get them in the playoffs, you give them a shot. But I don't see them as a legit World Series threat. But I agree with you on those 3 teams: Yankees, Orioles, and Guardians, for sure.
I agree with all that. And, before we end this segment, we do need to mention one more New York team, though, to me.
Okay.
And that's the New York Mets, or the New York Mess, who we talked at the start about how they might be the worst team, but then they rallied out of it. So we're like, okay, maybe they'll do something. But this is the week where the entire facade has come off of the New York Mets. The Dodgers look like, they're going to need some assistance just getting onto the field after they got swept by Cincinnati last week. And they go in New York and sweep the Mets. So that's bad. Diaz goes on the IL. That's bad. And then it gets really weird because of Jorge Lopez. And I don't really understand what his problem was. He gave up a 2-run homer to Shohei Ohtani, and then got into it with the third base umpire, which, I don't get what he had to do with him giving up a 2-run homer. And but he got ejected. Then he threw his glove high enough that it went over the top of the netting and went into the stands. And so the Mets immediately released him. And so it is as bleak in New York and they got to look over there and see the bright light that's the Yankees, which they've done pretty much their entire existence. But it's looking especially appalling to me in New York. I've been to the Citi Field. It's a great place to watch a baseball game, but their team, the Mets, it's just terrible what's going on with them right now.
They're a mess for sure. When you look at the league in general, and you can look at a New York team that's just below the radar, nobody thinks about, nobody cares about. That's usually not a great thing. and yeah, the Mets, the way they've been playing, not just this season, this isn't the beginning of it, of course, but when you got guys on your team like Alonso, you should be better than what they have been. That brings up the question of, does Alonso get traded? Does Lindor get traded? Who do they move on from? And what do they do as an organization to hold on to anything or rebuild or whatever it is they decide to do? I don't know. I think Alonso is going to be an intriguing candidate here to be traded in the coming weeks, especially for some of these teams. I'm thinking of teams like teams that need to show up. Maybe how about a team like Houston to go out and get Alonso? Somebody like that.
Right.
Their first baseman hasn't been great.
Hasn't been even average.
Yeah. So
calling him average is a compliment. So I would be more intrigued about Alonso than I would about Lindor, because as I mentioned, there are quite a few shortstops who are playing well throughout the major leagues. So maybe he doesn't have the value that Alonso does.
Yeah.
But they both could very easily be on the way out.
Yeah.
And Diaz, if he could stay healthy, he might be on the way out too. But this is the second year in a row where the Mets have crash landed, and it's. I'm not a New York fan at all, even a little.
I've got two of them in my ads for this week, but
okay, I'll be interested to see that then. But yeah, the New York Mess is the correct name for that team right now.
All right, I like it. All right, that's our call to the pin. It's presented by Righteous Felon Jerky. Go to righteousfelon.com. Use the code STOVE15 at checkout, and you're going to get 15% off your purchase. Let's head into our ads and drops this week in the segment we call the Fantasy Focus. Fantasy Focus is presented by BellyUpFantasySports.com. It's where you can go and find all kinds of articles, fantasy related, and of course, every single article from Kevin Wilson himself is on BellyUpFantasySports.com. Again, I want to start with the drops this week, Kevin, and get those out of the way. And then we'll get to our additions. So I'm going to start us off with a guy. He's been brought up before, but he's still owned in 49.7% of leagues. Toronto pitcher Yusei Kikuchi. Just struggling, man. He doesn't need to be on your roster unless he's playing the White Sox, maybe the A's or the Rockies. But yeah, he's not a guy that needs to be on your roster consistently right now. And I know, Kevin, you've brought him up in the past, I think a couple weeks ago, but 49% of the people are not listening. So Yasai Kikuchi's the first guy I said we got to get rid of this week.
I agree with that. And unfortunately for me, there's a pitcher that you dropped, I picked up, and then he proceeded to take an enormous crap on the field, if you will. Okay. And that's Jordan Montgomery.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. At 59% rostered. Okay. Let's see. Against Detroit, he gave up 4 runs on 5 hits. Miami was 2 runs on 9 hits against Miami. Okay. So that really doesn't count. And then against the Mets, of all teams, the Mets, he pitched 4 innings, gave up 6 runs on 9 hits, and only 3 strikeouts. -7 fantasy points, which started my weekend of my fantasy team spiraling downhill. And even though he's got the Giants on Wednesday, I'm sorry, Jordan Montgomery in a 10-man league. If you're in a bigger league, then you're pretty much stuck with him. But in a 10-man league, you could do probably better on the waiver wire, which is some of the guys we'll talk about in a minute, than Jordan Montgomery.
Let's say Montgomery had, I don't know, let's give him 13 points instead of -7 to start your season or start your week. Kevin, you'd be tied right now in your matchup. Just a 13-point outing from Jordan Montgomery.
Right, which wasn't much to ask for, like I said, playing the mess. Okay.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And but it didn't have -7.
Yeah.
That's what you expect out of a relief pitcher that gives up 2 runs in the 9th inning. And so that started my weekend off pretty poorly. And so, like I said, at 59% rostered, his name is what people are still looking at, but he's going to have to do way better than that for me to even think about trusting him going forward.
All right, I'm going to do you one better.
Okay.
In similar fashion to Jordan Montgomery, though, still owned in 67.9% of leagues, San Francisco Giant pitcher Blake Snell.
Okay.
He's right there in line with
Go ahead. Bring it.
He's given, after going with 2 straight negative outings against Tampa and Arizona, he pulled some positive numbers, a 2-pointer against Pittsburgh, a 9-pointer against Philly, and a 10-pointer against the Yankees. But he's injured again. He's set for an MRI and probably going back to the injured list. He's not done anything this season to make you think he's worth being on your roster. 70% of leagues have Blake Snell on a roster, including, Kevin, our league. No, he has been dropped today by Chase Thornton. Chase had him on his roster until today. He's dropped him. So Blake Snell should not be on a roster anywhere right now.
Isn't that something? We're talking about 2 pitchers that we thought signed with, great potential, great teams, great for them, and it hasn't worked out for either one of them. So pitchers in the future, spring training does mean something.
Yeah. Well,
so take that as a little lesson, if you will.
You mean as far as attending spring training, not necessarily your numbers in spring training. Right. Okay.
No. Your numbers mean absolutely nothing.
Okay.
But participating in spring training
matters. Yeah.
Means something. And so there's another guy that I could have brought up in our section about guys that started off pretty well but have hit rough times. And that's Cutter Crawford of the Boston Red Sox, who is at 69.1% rostered and has a pretty decent ERA, but gave up 6 runs on 7 hits to your Milwaukee Brewers in 4 1/3 innings. That's -3 fantasy points. Baltimore, he gave up, that's in 6 innings, 5 runs on 4 hits, 2 walks, 5 fantasy points. Tuesday versus Atlanta. Now, we know Atlanta is scuffling, but they still have a lineup. And so maybe you don't want to drop him just yet. Maybe in a 10-team league, maybe you do. But I would not start him against the Atlanta Braves and see how that works out. Because that's, that could set off your whole week on the wrong foot to me. And so Cutter Crawford, he's a guy who I don't trust at all at the present moment.
Okay. My last guy for drops this week is owned in 75.8% of leagues. Dad, if you're listening, plug your ears. Randy Arozarena in Tampa, one of Dad's favorite fantasy baseball players. He's batting 160 on the year. He does have 8 home runs, 19 RBIs, and 7 stolen bases. Against Kansas City a couple weeks ago, he managed 2 fantasy points in a 3-game series. Against the Oakland Athletics, he managed 3 fantasy points in 3 games. And this week against Baltimore, he managed 2 fantasy points as well. He has a total of 68 fantasy points on the year. And honestly, I get his name. I get in the past. I get last season. I get all of that stuff. But this year is not Randy Arozarena's year. And I mean, at the very least, try to trade him. But I don't think he'd be on my roster right now, Kev. I think I'd be willing to drop Randy Arozarena.
Yeah. He's a guy that I thought much of coming into the season.
Yeah.
But as you're mentioning, it's not working out. So, Dale, if you're listening, follow the advice of your son right there. And so I got some other players, but the one I want to definitely mention is Mr. Tommy Pham. Okay. And he's hitting 287, which we could have mentioned him probably earlier too, as well as a guy who was playing pretty well and a guy that I thought could be a possible replacement for Acuna. However, don't listen to any of that. Okay. 2 for 25 this week. -1, 0, -1, 3, -2, -2 is what he did. And he's getting heated against your Milwaukee Brewers. I don't know if you saw that. He was thrown out by about 10 feet at the plate because the fly ball was only in medium left field. So he was going to get thrown out.
Hold on. No. It was a phenomenal throw by Christian Yelich.
Okay, it was phenomenal, but it didn't take a phenomenal throw to get him, is all I'm saying.
And he was never tried it. He was running. He was going after the catcher. Thankfully, didn't run him over. It didn't hurt him. But yeah, he got mad about the response from Contreras and the pitcher, and he was ready to go fight. And the Brewers, listen. Finish your thought. I'm sorry, I'm getting off.
No worries. But so getting heated on the field is not a good look, but not nearly as good a look as like I said. Let's see. So let's see. That's in macro. My math is not so good, but -3 fantasy points, I believe, is what he delivered this week. So -3 fantasy points has no place on a roster anywhere in the world or universe or anywhere else. So I'm sorry, Tommy Pham's got to go.
I will say the Brewers have had more bench clearing situations.
Yeah.
I don't get it. It's been with the first base coach. It's been with the manager. It's been with pitchers. It's been with all kinds of different people. Reese Hoskins. I mean, it's been everybody. And it seems like every series there's a bench clearing, not brawl, but a bench clearing situation every time. So anyways, yeah, that was fun. That was fun to watch. Yelich throw him out, and Contreras, had a few words for him, and then he was ready to fight after that. But anyways, drop the White Sox, just get rid of them.
Drop them, and there's still I'm not going to get into any of their stats or anything, but Dylan Moore is a guy that we have mentioned on this show previously.
Yeah,
that run is over.
It is.
Cedric Mullins is a guy who I discussed earlier.
Yeah,
he is still over.
Who's performed better than Randy Arozarena, yet has been on the waiver wire longer, is owned by fewer teams, and yet people are still holding on to Randy Arozarena when Mullins would be a better, and he would not be a good addition, but would be better than Randy Arozarena.
Yeah, because Mullins is still at 58.8% roster.
Yeah.
And we could talk about them 0, -2, 0, 0, -2. My math is pretty good. That's -4 fantasy points.
Yep. Not good.
Not good.
All
Not
right.
good.
Let's get to the
So
good though.
cut
All
them.
right.
All right. So let's move on to the good news. All right.
I got all kinds of guys to add this week, Kevin.
Me too. Me
So
too.
I'm hoping that we have some of the same guys so I can skip over some of these. Go ahead. Who you got first?
Okay. So the first guy I'm going to talk about is someone that we've mentioned before here. And I'm sure that we will again, even though he pitches for one of those lousy teams that you don't know what you're going to get from. But that's Mackenzie Gore,
Yeah.
first of all. And so he's at 19.5% rostered. He has a 2.91 ERA, 72 Ks, a 1.28 WHIP, and he's faced some pretty solid teams: Texas, Toronto, at Boston, at Philly, Seattle, at Atlanta. And so he's pitched really well against those guys. And so tomorrow he faces the New York Mets. We talked about the Mets earlier. And so I'm willing to pitch my tent on Mackenzie Gore against the Mets. And even though I got burned by Kyle Harrison earlier, but Mackenzie Gore has pitched extremely well. And so he's the kind of guy that I want starting off my week and on my fantasy team. So he's my first guy that I'm going to mention.
Yeah, Mackenzie Gore is on my streaming list. Like when I'm looking for a pitcher, I go see who Mackenzie Gore is facing. I don't know how he's only owned in 19% of leagues. Again, for me, he's not the kind of guy I'm going to keep on my roster year round, but I am definitely looking at him and who he's pitching against, and I'm more than comfortable with having him on my roster, especially when the matchup is good. I'm going to give you my first Met, and he's only owned in 4.4% of leagues. And his brother pitches for the Brewers, which doesn't really mean anything. But Tyler McGill in the Mets, he absolutely crushed the Dodgers last week. He went 7 innings, 9 strikeouts, 1 walk, 0 earned runs, 3 hits, scored 27 fantasy points. In just his third appearance and third outing of the season, he started off against Milwaukee back in March and went 4 innings, 1 earned run, 4 strikeouts. He got hurt, didn't come back. Now he's pitched twice in the month of May the 20th against Cleveland, 5 innings, 7 strikeouts, 2 earned runs, and against the Dodgers on the 28th, 9 strikeouts with 0 earned runs. Tomorrow, Monday, he plays against the Washington Nationals. We just talked about Mackenzie Gore. Tyler McGill, listen, in 3 games, his ERA is 1.69, 20 strikeouts in 3 games. Those are good stats. And as much as the Mets are a mess, I think Tyler McGill is going to give you enough to be helpful on your fantasy team. I don't know that he's going to drop the 27 that he did against the Dodgers, which is still mind-blowing. But I think he's a 15 to 20-pointer against the Nationals on Monday night. So if you're going to get him, you better get him fast because he pitches on Monday.
That's right. So he sets him up for a 2-start week. I don't know who he's starting in the second one, but you definitely want to take a look at that. Same with Gore. And unbelievably, sometimes you just don't believe, okay, what you're about to say. But I'm going to go with a second straight Washington Nationals pitcher.
Okay.
In this case, it's Trevor Williams, who is at 21% rostered. He's 5-0. With a 2.22 ERA, 1.08 WHIP, and has 168 fantasy points. Now, how this guy is only at 21.3% rostered, maybe Washington explains that entire thing. But he's pitched at Philadelphia, Seattle, at Atlanta. So it's not like he's going up against the Chicago White Sox and the Miami Marlins, all right? So let's see. So Tuesday, he goes up against the New York Mets. Okay, so Washington National pitchers, unbelievably enough, might get your fantasy week off to a solid start. And so I would be very, very pleased if I had either one or both of those on my fantasy team.
Nice. Update on Tyler McGill. He's only going to pitch once this week because the Mets are going to London at the last part of the week.
Right.
To play the Phillies. So McGill will pitch again next Tuesday against the Marlins. So a good matchup there as well. But again, I wouldn't keep McGill on my roster. I'd stream him this week. and go on to someone else. Let's go to the Dodgers. This is a guy that is owned, and I didn't write this down for some reason. I think it's a 30-something% of leagues. Hang on a sec. Let me pull it up. Okay, 37.3% of leagues, which has gone up about 20% in the last week. He pitched against Colorado this past week. Today, got 20 points. Against the Mets last week, 31 points. He's had a couple other big games this year. Gavin Stone from the Dodgers, again, pitching this week. Should pitch twice, I think, this week since he pitched today. Which I guess would be next week. But anyways, Gavin Stone's been really, really solid. He's given you 6+ innings in all except for his last start. He's given you an average amount of strikeouts, usually around that 4 to 5 to 6 range. Double-digit fantasy points in all but 3 appearances so far this year. And 2 of those appearances were really early in the season. So Gavin Stone has found his groove. He's got the Yankees on Saturday, which is a scary matchup, but I think Stone is the kind of player that's not a streamer yet. I think he needs to be on your roster. I think he should be rostered in every league. 3.16 ERA, 145 fantasy points, 41 strikeouts, 5-2 win record. I like Gavin Stone as a regular roster person right now in fantasy baseball.
I agree with that. And in practical terms, if I had added Gavin Stone to my team instead of letting Chase beat me to him,
Yep,
I'd currently be tied with Chase.
Yep.
But that's what he got, 20 fantasy points today.
Yeah. Yep.
So, sometimes, it's not like my pitchers. And that's the thing, too, is sometimes you make decisions that don't crash and burn, but still, you don't win. But anyway, so there's that. And let's see. How about if we go with a Cincinnati player?
Oh, my. Okay.
Okay. And that's Jameer Candelario.
Yeah.
I guess first base, third base at 12.3% rostered. Okay. So 6 homers, 21 RBIs, 18 runs. He had 2 hits Saturday, 2 hits again today, hits in 7 of his last 9 games. And I like that first base, third base combo. And so if you happen to be one of those guys who's looking for a first baseman or a third, then Jameer Candelario is a guy that I would look into because, especially when you're at home, that's a good, as hitting park as you're going to find. So he's available. And if you need help at either first or third, I would look his way.
All right. We've talked a lot this season about the DH spot, guys who are only eligible for designated hitter. And that brings us back to the New York Mets. 12.1% owned for the first time this season, becoming relevant. JD Martinez had himself a series against Arizona this week. He goes in and he scores 23 fantasy points in the series against Arizona. And boy, do they need JD Martinez to hit the ball. And he's going to get plenty of opportunity to do so as well. He does, fill that DH spot on your fantasy roster. You can put him in the utility spot also. But right now he's available in a whole lot of leagues, and he is raking coming into this week. And again, going up against Washington, you've talked about those pitchers that you need to add. I think it's also a fair matchup for JD Martinez. If he's found his groove, it's worth riding that wave out right now.
I would not disagree with that. I was talking about him as being a drop earlier.
Right.
But
and he was. Yeah.
JD Martinez can swing the bat, and when he gets hot, so you need to act on that. And so the last player I'm going to bring up is we've talked about the catcher position, and one of the guys who's only at 9.9% rostered is Connor Wong of the Boston Red Sox, who's hitting .329, 5 homers, 19 RBIs, hits in 4 of his last 5 games. And so he took the day off. And so when he's back, that'll put him in the lineup for the next couple of days, 3 days. So that's one of the keys about the catching position is they're going to take a day off. Yeah. They're going to play 3 games and take a day off. But if you can plan when the guy's actually going to be in the lineup and he's available, as Connor Wong is, he's a guy I would look at.
Yeah, I agree. I've got 2 Detroit players, and I am as low on Detroit as anybody around. Okay, but 2 of them, and this one first, I put my money where my mouth is. 19.4% owned. Matt Vierling, outfielder, third baseman. I have picked him up in every league I'm in. He is absolutely, and I'm in categories leagues and points leagues. Matt Vierling has been phenomenal. He's been consistent. He gives you the positional flexibility of outfield and third base. He had a great series against Pittsburgh. He had a great series against Toronto where he had a 2 home run game there. He's got 7 home runs on the year, 292, 25 runs, 28 RBIs. He just surpassed 100 fantasy points this week. And again, playing every single day and producing in every single one of his at-bats in the last month, with the exception of one game against Toronto. He went 1 for 4, but 0 fantasy points in that game. Matt Vierling should be on your roster. If he's available in your league, and I'm telling you, can't go wrong with this pickup. And I am not a Tigers guy, but Matt Vierling has been really, really good here as of late and worth being on your roster, again, with some positional flexibility. The other Tiger is a familiar name, well, he's less than 1% owned in leagues right now. So he's available. He's available in our league, Kevin, if you want him. Gio Urshela, he's third base, first base eligible. And again, he's getting this playing time, and all of a sudden, his numbers are starting to appear. Only 2 home runs this season. Well, guess what? They were both in the past week. He's got 12 RBIs. Well, guess what? Most of those half of those were last week. He's batting .276. He played Boston in a 4-game series, and he put up 17 points in those 4 games. And before that, against Pittsburgh, he put up 6 points as well. So in the last 2 series, he's been rolling. He's available in pretty much every single league. So if you need somebody on the corner, Gio Urshela can help you out with that. But I would take Matt Vierling first, because that guy is absolutely raking right now.
Sounds like a plan to me. And I'm not a high on the Detroit Tigers, even though this is a Cat Central house. And I liked them coming into the season, but they have not maintained their pace. But, individuals on a fantasy team, doesn't really matter what their team's doing. So
that's right.
If they're swinging the bat, that's all it's, or pitching, whichever the case may be, that's all it's important.
We gave you Nationals, we gave you Mets, we gave you Tigers.
Yeah. So you can ask if maybe we've taken leave of our senses if you want to, but the numbers back it up. And so listen or don't, that's up to you.
All right, Kev. I had my best week in fantasy baseball this week, hitting 483 points, almost eclipsed the 500 mark this week. Finally, my scoring is coming around just in time to lock up spot number 3 in our roster, our league this year. You and my dad both helped me out this week by losing, giving me a two game lead on you guys. And Chase and Dan continue to win. Both of them are 9-1 after this season. They're rolling. I've got to play them here coming up pretty soon as well. But Kev, you're still right there in that race for the playoffs. You and Dad are tied at 5-5. Nathan Nguyen follows in right behind you guys. Then Mike Brown, Ryan Capablo, and then Elizabeth Lovato and Brent Radlinsky bring up the rear. Quite the week. You've had quite the schedule going up against some of the top
teams here. For the second straight week, I go into Sunday in the league. Okay.
Yeah.
That was against you last week, and then I just can't close.
Right.
So, and as I mentioned, I played Dan, who was unbeaten. I took him down. Went toe to toe with you.
Yeah.
Went toe to toe with Chase.
Yep.
And him and I have exchanged some what we'll call pleasantries. Okay. And we're playing each other. And but
you go
through, and the day started, I was 10 points ahead of him.
Yeah.
And when Gavin Stone gives you 20 and Lodello gives him, I forget what it was, but he gave him positive fantasy points up and well down as wazoo. So sometimes you just take it in the face and, try and get up the next week.
Yeah, you've got an easy run coming up though, Kevin. You get the bottom of the league over the next several weeks until you face up July 22nd against Dan. Now you got Dad in 2 weeks, so sorry, Dad, didn't mean to include you in the bottom of the league. But you got Ryan, you got Brent, you've got Emily, you've got Mike, you've got Nate before you go up against Dan again. So yeah, you'll get a little bit of a break here in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, you had myself, Dan, and Chase, the top 3 teams in the league in the last 3 weeks, and you beat Dan. So that was great. And like you said, you were right there with me and with Chase. Before that, you beat Nate, who was on a run at that point as well. So yeah, it's going to be fun to see how it all shakes out. We still have several weeks left in the season, but I was impressed with the run that you just had. As for me, outside of Kevin, I had a little bit of an easier go of it. And I will kind of circle back around in a couple weeks to get Dan and Chase and my dad. And I will actually end the year against Dan as well. So that might be fighting for a playoff seeding or something like that. But nonetheless, fun times in the old fantasy league. All right. Fantasy Burners presented by BellyUpFantasySports.com. My goodness, I didn't even look at the time. We're well over today. Kev, tell people what's going on at BellyUpFantasySports.com with articles you have out or have coming out here in the near future.
Well, the article that, because I decided when it was announced, because when we were live last week, we knew Acuna was going to be out. But then it was announced, not only is he out, he's out for the season.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a breaking news that we could have probably used maybe, an hour before that.
An hour earlier, yeah.
But anyway, so I decided I was going to write an article about players that you could get to. There's really no replacing Acuna.
Right.
But to try and replace him, I posted that on Monday, and I'm pleased to report that since then, that article has had 50,000 views on Reddit. So Mike, there you go. I'm announcing my early candidacy for Article of the Year right now. Okay, so having said that, I think this first week of June, I think I'm going to take a week off this week. So I'm not looking to do any articles this week, but next week I'll be back in the fold. And so who knows what I might be talking about at that point, because as baseball is topsy-turvy as it is, who knows what might, what's that? Who knows, the shadow says or whatever, who knows what could be lurking or whatever that was he said. So just be looking out for that next week, and I'll see you then.
All right, very good. Of course, you can get those articles on BellyUpFantasySports.com. You can search Kevin Wilson, and you're going to see all of his past articles as well. Follow him on Twitter at Kevin62 WILSEA. As for me, it's going to be a slow week for me. I will have a show coming out Tuesday at 8 p.m., and my dad will join me to talk sports. We'll have a guest on to talk NASCAR. That'll be going on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. And we did not get a show out last week. I had planned to, but other things came up. And then this week we're heading off on vacation. So we're going to get that show in earlier this week. So that'll be Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. You can check it out there. Monday, my plan is to do some live tweeting from the Tampa Bay Rays Baltimore Orioles game. Hopefully some pictures, maybe a live interview with the right fielder. We'll see. We'll see what we can get done while we're there. But looking forward to that. We'll get some pictures and things going on there. So you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sports Stove. Post some pictures there as well. Next Sunday, I will not be here. There's a good chance Kevin will be. And if he is, then he'll have
some things we'll talk about off air about that.
Okay. So we may or may not have a show, but if we do, it'll be here.
That's right.
Check it out from there. And then otherwise we'll be back and back at it again in 2 weeks. Father's Day week, actually, we'll be back. I'll be back then in the office. And so we'll be ready to go from there as well. We gave you a lot of information today. Hopefully it helps you. It's helped me. So
that's what we're here for, is to help people not just ourselves, and to our detriment oftentimes, is we talk and then our league mates who watch the show react. And then by the time we get, well, should I follow my own advice? Well, it's too late because your dad or Chase or Nate or somebody has added the players we talked about. So we're happy to help out, even though it hurts our bottom line.
Nathan Nguyen, if you're listening, first of all, you're doing way better than last year. So keep up the
That's
good work.
right. That's right.
Secondly, why will you not trade me Christian Yelich? I have made you legitimate offers and you reject it. I want to know why, Nathan. So I want Christian
next time I talk to him, I will get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, I don't get it. Now, I mean, I'm not saying every offer I've made is one he should accept, but I have made him some legitimate offers. So I'm frustrated. I want Christian Yelich on my team. Okay. That's it for tonight. Let's move on. We shouldn't end it on a bad note. The Cubs lost to the Brewers 3 times this past week.
That's right. And
they're going to get swept by the White Sox this week, so it's all good.
So happily enough, as I mentioned, we have power here. So we're ending the week on a positive note.
There you go.
And so start your week on a positive note as well. How could it not be? Because you watched us. So
I hear laughter in the crowd. That's not fair. That's a true statement, Kevin. All right. Thanks for tuning in to the Sports So Fantasy Baseball Show. Thanks again to Belly Up Fantasy Sports, Righteous Felon, and SeatGeek for their support of the program. And thanks to Kevin, of course, always as well. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, we'll see you.
Everybody have a great week.